The morning of my wedding in June of 1962, I stood at the top of the stairs in my parents' farmhouse, holding the bouquet my sister Rebecca had picked from the garden at dawn. White roses and baby's breath, tied with a strip of plain cotton because ribbons were forbidden. I could hear the buggies arriving outside. I could hear my father's voice in the kitchen, low and serious. And I could hear something else, the sound of my mother's bedroom door closing, not slamming, closing. Soft and final, the way you close a door when you've already made a decision that nothing in this world is going to change. She didn't come down. She didn't come to the ceremony. She didn't watch me marry the man I had waited 3 long years to call my husband. And for 64 years, I have carried the weight of that closed door with me. Every anniversary, every Christmas, every time I sat in church and watched another mother straighten her daughter's prayer cap on her wedding day. Before I tell you why my mother refused to come down those stairs, I need you to understand something. The reason she stayed in that bedroom wasn't anger. It wasn't shame in the way you might think. It was something older and deeper and far more painful than I understood when I was 20 years old, standing there in my plain blue wedding dress, wondering if my own mother hated me. It took me 40 years to understand, and by the time I did, she was already buried in the family plot behind the meeting house. My name is Anna. I am 82 years old. I grew up Old Order Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I left the community in 1978. 16 years after the wedding, my mother refused to attend. This channel, Hannah the Amish Girl, has invited me to share stories from a generation most of you have never heard from directly. The women who came of age in the 1940s and 50s, who married in the early 60s, who lived through changes the outside world never even noticed. If you want to hear more stories from the oldest generation still living, subscribe and tap that like button. And in the comments, tell me where you are watching from. I read every single one, even at my age. My granddaughter helps me. Let me take you back, because to understand why my mother closed that door, you have to understand what the world looked like for an Amish woman in 1962. I was born in 1943 on a dairy farm 7 miles outside of Intercourse, Pennsylvania. My mother, Katie, was 22 when she had me. She had married my father at 19, and by the time she was 30, she had borne 6 children, 3 of whom lived. 2 of my brothers died as infants, a diphtheria outbreak in 1947 that took children from every farm on our road. My mother did not speak of them, ever, not once in my entire childhood, but I would sometimes find her sitting in the rocking chair by the window with 2 small wooden blocks in her apron pocket, worn smooth from being held. That was the world she came from, a world where you buried your children and you kept working, a world where grief was private to the point of invisibility, a world where a woman's worth was measured in the bread she baked, the quilt she stitched, and the obedience she showed to her husband, her father, and her bishop. I share this because I want you to understand who my mother was before I tell you what she did. She was not cruel. She was not cold. She was a woman shaped by losses I could not see, and a faith that gave her no language for any of it. I met Samuel when I was 17 years old at a Sunday singing. He was 19, the youngest son of a family from a neighboring church district. He had quiet hands and the kind of slow smile that made you feel he was thinking carefully about everything he said before he said it. He drove me home in his courting buggy that night. The lantern swung between us, throwing shadows across his face, and I remember thinking, this is the one. This is the man I will marry. I had known him for 4 hours. We courted for 3 years. That is longer than most Amish courtships in that era. Most of my friends were married within a year of their first buggy ride. But Samuel and I were careful, slow, deliberate. We bundled in my upstairs bedroom under my grandmother's quilt, fully clothed, talking for hours about the farm we wanted, the children we hoped for, the way we wanted to live a quieter life than our parents had. There was a tradition in our district that I have not heard discussed in any of these other videos. The Heiratsfrage, the marriage question. Before a couple could be published in church, the young man had to sit with the girl's mother alone in the kitchen and answer her questions, not the father, the mother. It was one of the few moments in Amish life where a woman held the official power. She could refuse him, she could send him away, and the bishop would honor her decision. Samuel sat with my mother in our kitchen on a Tuesday evening in March of 1962. I was sent to the barn. I remember standing in the cold milking parlor, my breath making clouds in the air, listening to the cows shift in their stalls, praying so hard my hands shook. He came out after an hour. His face was pale. He would not look at me. He climbed into his buggy and drove away without saying a word. When I went back into the house, my mother was standing at the sink, washing the same cup over and over. She did not turn around. She said, in Pennsylvania Dutch, the language of every important moment in our home, that I could marry him if I chose. But she would not bless it. She would not stand witness. She would not be part of it. I asked her why. I begged her to tell me. She would not answer. For 3 months, I tried. I left notes on her pillow. I sat at her feet while she shelled peas on the porch. I cried at the kitchen table. She would touch my hair sometimes, gently, the way she did when I was small. But she would not speak of it. My father, who in our community held all the official authority, told me I was free to marry Samuel. He liked Samuel. He thought it was a good match. But he also told me in his quiet, careful way that my mother had her reasons and that I would have to live with the cost of not knowing them. I chose Samuel. I would choose him again today. The wedding was held at our farm, as all Amish weddings were in those days. 200 guests on wooden benches in the front parlor and the barn. My mother stayed upstairs. The bishop came up to her room before the ceremony. I do not know what they said. He came down looking tired. He performed the ceremony anyway, but he kept glancing at the staircase, as if he expected her to appear at any moment. She did not appear. I want to tell you something I have never told anyone, not even my own daughters. During the vows, when the bishop asked me if I would take Samuel to be my husband, I almost said no. Not because I did not love him. I loved him with every part of me that knew how to love. But because in that moment, looking out at all those faces, with the place where my mother should have been sitting empty, I thought, if I say yes, I lose her forever, and I almost could not bear it. I said yes anyway, and Samuel squeezed my hand so gently I almost wept. The reception lasted until evening. My mother did not come down. The guests pretended not to notice. That is what Amish people do. We make absence invisible by refusing to name it. By sundown, every neighbor on our road knew that Katie had not attended her daughter's wedding. By the next Sunday, the whole district knew. By the month's end, 3 counties knew. And not one person, not one, asked her why. That was not how things were done. Samuel and I moved into a small house on his uncle's property. We had our first child, a daughter named Sarah, 14 months later. My mother came to see her. She held that baby for 2 hours without saying a word, and when she left, there were tears on her cheeks. But she still would not speak of the wedding. I had 4 more children after Sarah. My mother loved every one of them. She made them quilts, brought them pies, taught my girls how to make apple butter the old way in a copper kettle over an open fire. She and I returned to a kind of quiet peace. But the wedding was a closed room between us, a door neither of us would open. I left the Amish community in 1978. Samuel and I left together with our 5 children. The reasons are long and complicated and belong to another conversation, but the short of it is that we could no longer live inside a world that asked us to look away from things we had seen. The shunning was immediate. My father wrote me one letter in his careful old-fashioned handwriting, telling me that I was no longer his daughter. My mother sent nothing. She died in 1986. I was not permitted to attend the funeral. I sat in my kitchen in Ohio, 400 miles away, while my mother was buried in the earth I had walked as a child, and I grieved her the only way I knew how. I baked her favorite bread. I sat at the table and ate it alone. It was my Aunt Lydia who finally told me. She was my mother's older sister, the only one in the family who would still speak to me after the shunning. She came to visit me in 1992, when I was 49 years old, and my mother had been dead for 6 years. We sat on my front porch in the late summer evening, and she said she had something to tell me that she should have told me 30 years before. My mother had been married before my father. I did not know this. No one had ever told me. When she was 18 years old, she had been engaged to a young man named Jacob Beeler. Their wedding had been planned for the fall of 1938. 2 weeks before the wedding, Jacob was kicked in the head by a horse and died within the day. My mother was not permitted to grieve him publicly because they had not yet been married. She was expected to attend church the following Sunday and behave as though nothing had happened. She was expected to accept another suitor within the year. She married my father in 1940, but that was not the part that mattered. The part that mattered was this. The family of Samuel, the man I had chosen to marry, was distantly related to Jacob Beeler. Samuel's grandfather and Jacob's father had been brothers. My mother had not been able to look at that family for 24 years. She had not been able to sit through a wedding that joined our family to theirs. She had not been able to watch her daughter marry into the bloodline of the boy she had buried before she was permitted to mourn him. She had never told anyone, not my father, not her sisters, not me. She had carried it alone for 48 years, and she had taken it into the ground with her. When my Aunt Lydia finished telling me this, I sat on that porch, and I wept for a long time. I wept for the girl my mother had been, standing in the rain at a funeral she could not claim. I wept for the woman who had closed her bedroom door because she had no words for what was happening inside her. I wept for myself, for the 20-year-old bride who had stood at the top of the stairs and thought her mother did not love her. She had loved me. She had loved me so much that she could not bring herself to do the one thing that would have torn open a wound she had spent half her life trying not to feel. I want to tell you what I have learned in the 64 years since that morning. I have learned that silence in our communities was not always cruelty. Sometimes it was the only language available to women who had been given no other way to carry what they carried. My mother did not have a therapist. She did not have a friend she could speak honestly to. She did not have a single hour in her entire life that belonged only to her grief. She had a kitchen. She had a sink. She had a cup she could wash over and over until the shaking in her hands stopped. I have also learned that the children of silent women inherit the silence. I did not tell my own daughters about my mother's refusal to attend my wedding until I was 70 years old. I carried it the way she carried Jacob, privately, wordlessly, with a door closed at the top of the stairs. If you grew up in a family where the most important things were never said, I see you. If you have spent your life trying to understand a parent who could not show you love in the way you needed it, I see you. If you are still carrying a hurt that was given to you by someone who was carrying a hurt of their own, I see you. My mother was not cold. She was a woman who had been asked to bury too much, too young, with no permission to feel any of it. The closed door at the top of the stairs was not a rejection. It was the only privacy a woman of her time and her faith was ever allowed. I named my fourth daughter Katie after her. She is 57 years old now. She has my mother's hands. If this story stayed with you, leave me a comment. Tell me about a silence in your own family that you have spent your life trying to understand. And if you want to hear more stories from the oldest generation behind the prayer cap, subscribe to Hannah, the Amish girl. There are so many of us still here, so many stories that were never permitted to be told. Until next time, hold the people you love while you still can, and ask the questions before the door closes for good.